Welcome. My name's Catherine du Menagé, and I'm the convener of the new New South Wales Sisters in Crime chapter, but more of that later. Sisters in Crime Australia is delighted to welcome you all to Deadly, Dangerous and Dazzling, the allure of South African crime fiction. And welcome also to the brave new world of Zooming. I'm sure we'll all get very good at this in the next couple of months. Today, L A Larkin and Natalie Conyer are in conversation with participating chair Malla Nunn, all from the safety of their own homes in Sydney. And they'll be talking about what drew them to set their crime thrillers in Africa, about their story locations, their characters, and their inspiration. At the outset, on behalf of Sisters in Crime Australia, we acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Now, this event was originally scheduled as a Gleebooks event to take place in the upstairs room above the shop, and also to be the official launch of the newly established Sisters in Crime New South Wales chapter. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the convener, and we'll tell you a tiny bit about Sisters in Crime. We exist, or Sisters in Crime exists, to celebrate and promote women's writing about crime, fiction or non-fiction. Now, we're going to be following in the footsteps of our older and much wiser sister, or should I say mother, Sisters in Crime Australia, or Sisters in Crime Melbourne. We'll be running some fun events, and we hope to actually be able to meet all of you in person at some point, but not today. Now I'll introduce the panel. The participating chair is Malla Nunn, who's the author of 4 internationally published and internationally celebrated adult crime novels set in 50s apartheid South Africa, just as the apartheid laws have been passed. I've read them all and they are fabulous. Her debut YA novel, When the Ground is Hard, published by Allen and Unwin, is set in a Swaziland boarding school where 2 girls of very different castes bond and change each other's lives over a shared copy of Jane Eyre. It's also fabulous. Her debut adult novel, A Beautiful Place to Die, won the Sisters in Crime Davitt Award for Best Adult Crime Fiction in 2009, so we know a good thing when we see it. L A Larkin has written 4 thrillers. Now, she loves very short titles. The Genesis Floor is the longest one. Then we go to Thirst, Devour, and most recently Prey by Clandestine Press. I assume we'll be down to 2 letters soon. It, perhaps. Louisa has been likened by The Guardian to Michael Crichton, and by The Times to Alistair MacLean. Not a bad duo. The Genesis Floor was nominated for 4 crime fiction awards, and Thirst was described as the best Antarctic thriller since Ice Station. Now, she has an alter ego, Louisa Bennett, and writes humorous mysteries featuring Monty, a dog detective who commemorates not by email, but by we-mail. Natalie Conyer's debut novel, Present Tense, also published by Clandestine Press, is also set in Cape Town, where she was born and raised, although she's lived in Australia for a long time. And it's at least in part about the presence of the past and the fact the past will not go. Her hero is Detective Skulk Lorenz, and Present Tense was chosen extremely deservedly as Pick of the Week by The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald in January. Natalie, who's a long-term reader of crime fiction, liked it so much that 6 years ago she gave up a perfectly good career to start to write it. Her short stories won awards in Sisters in Crime Scarlet Stiletto competition. She's also just finished a doctorate in creative arts at the University of Western Sydney University, and it was, of course, in crime fiction. Now I'll hand over to Malla and let you enjoy a wonderful interview. Bye.
Thank you so much for the introductions. So this is an event that is about South African crime. And the first thing I want to ask esteemed authors that have joined me, and I'll ask you, Natalie, first, why South Africa? It's often said that setting is almost important as character. So what was it that drew you back, in a sense, to what might be considered home turf?
Two reasons. One, I grew up there, as Catherine says, and I left many years ago. And I left during apartheid because I didn't want any part of it and avoided all things South African for very many years. And when I went back, apartheid had gone and everything had changed. So in part, the book is a way of thinking about how the past has affected the new South Africa, but also South Africa, and specifically Cape Town, is an incredibly exciting place and a place of contrasts. It's got a massive crime rate, but but it's very dynamic at the same time. It's got fabulous beauty and against squalor. It's got riches against the poorest, most unequal people. And so it's one of the most interesting places in the world to explore. And in terms of crime fiction, that's the way I chose to do it. And I think it's a very good way of exploring a country.
On to you, Louisa, because your books have got quite international settings. Your characters tend to move through different areas and aren't as tightly wound to a city as, say, present tense. But so what was it? Was there something, a personal attachment to South Africa, or was there a particular criminal activity that you'd read about that was very South African that drew you to set your stuff and to set prey in South Africa?
Yeah, so I like to set my thrillers in various countries, keeping it interesting. The thing about South Africa, I've never lived in South Africa, but I've been there twice now. And the last time I was there, which was quite some time ago, I came aware of a particular really big issue that really moved me. And since this has got to be about 15 years ago, and it was when I was backpacking and I was on my way arriving in this country with my little backpack, and I went through 8 countries in Africa as a backpacker in a tent. And this particular issue, and I'm going to have to do a spoiler alert now because I am going to start revealing a little bit about some of the things in the story in Prey. But I came across one of the big problems in South Africa is the illegal trade in wildlife, particularly poaching of animals for their tusks or their horns. And this really moved me and actually terrified me, because the criminal syndicates that drive this are generally, not all, but generally not actually based even in South Africa. They're in Vietnam mainly, or China. And they are running these operations like, they are military style operations. And they're actually really quite terrifying. And the poachers now are incredibly well equipped with helicopters, AK-47s, they can blackmail people, they can blackmail guards at fences, bureaucrats. And the more I found out about this, the more I realized that this was the makings of actually quite a moving and terrifying story. And so in a way, I guess, the very nature of the theme of the book that I wanted to write about and the conspiracy that I wanted Olivia Wolfe to uncover necessitated that it would be set in South Africa, where there are the largest numbers of white rhinos in the world, and they're under terrible threat. So it was kind of almost like a fait accompli, but I would say also that South Africa provides an amazing backdrop for a thriller. It's got stunning countryside, amazing locations, and also quite a lot of quite naturally dangerous things that can happen. And so it was perfect if I want to create an action adventure thriller with a really kind of deep psychological scary element to it. It was just and is just the perfect place to set it.
I think that it really is. It is a combination of actual things happening on the ground, and exactly what you'd said, and Natalie, was that there's this kind of this tension between beauty and squalor, and just this and money, ridiculous amounts of money and no money. So there's always a sort of a tension that hums through, I think, the South African landscape. Now, so that's a great. So we all agree that it is got this wonderful sort of bone throw setting. But in terms of your main characters, they are really quite different. So Natalie, I'll start with you, because your main character, Skulk, he's a veteran police officer, and he's white, and he's working in the new South African police force, kind of, but the shadow of apartheid really does still fall over him. Can you tell me a little bit about who he is and what attracted you to him so that he became the center of your book? Natalie, did you hear me?
Yeah, no, I did. Skulk is a policeman. He's just turned 50. He's old enough to have been a policeman during apartheid. He's white. He's half English, half Afrikaans. And for those of you who know about South Africa, that is another tension between white tribes in South Africa. And when the book starts, he's kind of lost. And I came to him because when I came back to South Africa, I started talking to all sorts of people. And when I talked to white older people, I found that many of them were really unsure of where they belonged in the new South Africa. They still have the financial clout and they still have most of the money. But politically and socially, they're kind of losing all their power. So I wanted to know what an ordinary person, a good guy basically, but somebody who had, if you had lived through apartheid as a cop, you would have done some things that you would really be ashamed of, I think. How that person would cope with life now, and in a climate, given South Africa's, institutional corruption, how you would know who to trust, and if you were emotionally damaged by apartheid, and how would it all wash up. And that's how Skulk came to me. And he sort of evolved a bit as the book went on. I found out more about him. But what I wanted essentially was an ordinary person finding their way in this new society.
He does strike me as a sort of South African man that you would sort of have to work into.
Yeah.
He's not a blabbermouth. He wouldn't have been sitting next to you saying, Natalie, and then I said this, and then I said that.
Yes.
He would be very, very sparing with what he told you and how he told you. I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, that's it. That is so spot on, because I had to work so hard. I mean, this is going to sound bizarre, but I had to work so hard to get him to tell me what he was on about. I don't know if the other two of you have had that experience.
Well, certainly he strikes me as a man with secrets, and he's not going to share them with you till you've proven yourself to him.
No. And I must just say, I've just finished reading When the Ground is Hard, and it is the most fantastic book. But it struck me that there was also a working through of the past in the present in that book.
Oh yeah, absolutely. South Africa's fantastic for that. It always seems like wherever you turn, something from the past jumps out and sort of attacks you, and all the wrongs from the past seem to carry over. And that actually, even if the books aren't set directly deeply in South Africa, so I mean, Louisa, that comes out in your books as well. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about your character, Olivia Wolfe. Because she's actually completely out there. Does she talk to you really easily? Because I mean, she digs through stuff, and she's very open and very. I hate that American term ballsy, but I'm going to have to use another word. So, can you tell us a little bit about Olivia and how you came to her? Because she's spread over a couple of books, isn't she? So, how did that come to you?
Okay. Oh, great question. But I will answer it, but I just want to say I'm also reading your book.
Oh, thank you, sir.
When you just got it, darling. So I'm sort of about a third way through it. Beautiful writing. It doesn't matter. It's a young adult book. I'm just completely hooked. I can imagine these girls and what's happening. Anyway, that's just as an aside, but it's absolutely fantastic. and I would recommend it to everybody. So Olivia Wolfe. Olivia Wolfe has only actually been in one other book. So she was in Devour, and I introduced her in Devour. And one thing I would just say is that with the second book, which is Prey, I deliberately wrote it so that you didn't actually have to have read Devour. No. Because I didn't want people to feel that, newcomers to my books didn't feel it was like, oh, well, there's no point in reading, Prey, which is literally just officially launched yesterday. If, I haven't read Devour. So I painstakingly made sure that the characters were clear and had their backstories. Now, Olivia Wolfe, she was originally inspired by a real journalist who I'm sure you both know, called Marie Colvin, who died a few years ago tragically in the siege of Homs. She was a war correspondent for the Times, and she very much focused on the injustices. And so I followed her for many years, and I always wanted to write a thriller character that was as brave, if I could make her, but also flawed, because, we all have our own flaws, we all have our own secrets. And so Olivia Wolfe came to me as this, as you say, ballsy, character, very independent, a loner. She's defined by the fact that she's got two backpacks. So she's got a warm climate one and a cold climate one, and they're always packed and ready to go. And in the days when you could literally hop on a plane and say, okay, there's a story in South Africa, you need to follow it, and off you go. Clearly before what we have now with the lockdown and everything, the stay at home and so on, she could do that. But what I love about her is that while she's also sort of fairly, she's dogged and determined to uncover the truth, and she does it from a good place in her heart. Because she's a bit reckless, she actually not only endangers herself, she endangers other people. She also has a bit of a dark past, which a London detective who's a bit of a father figure has helped her move away from. But part of the story of Prey is how her main adversary, Prey, hello, Prey, her main adversary will use this. Yes, I know. I'm second day into the launch.
Go for it, baby.
Yeah. So he will use this dark past to try and derail what she's trying to do, basically to blackmail her. I love her as a character. I love the dilemmas that she's faced in this book. Not only is it like, she's in a country she doesn't really understand, and I love taking characters out of their comfort zone and really putting them into, and even someone like Olivia Wolfe, who's pretty cool at hitting the ground running, finds herself really fazed by the culture, what you can and can't do. People are carrying guns. The police that she has contact with, the South African police, are corrupt. Who can she really trust? And so there's a big theme of trust and betrayal in Prey. It's not just about can she or can't she track down this criminal syndicate and prove what they're up to. Okay, good.
She's a very interesting. I can visualize her very, very easily. So Louisa, where you've come to it, looking at it with an outsider hitting this strange culture and kind of running through it. Natalie, you've almost got the opposite. You are returning to a place that you once knew very well. So how did you acclimatize yourself to what is now being called the new South Africa?
Yeah. I went back 4 times in 4 years. Between when I left and when I came back, I literally hadn't read anything about South Africa. I didn't read any South African literature. I avoided people from South Africa who had arrived in Australia, and still sometimes do. So I had to kind of start from scratch. And I just went on this absolute mission of finding out, and really to acclimatize, to really get it, I had to go there. And one of the dilemmas I have about writing the next sculpt, which I'm just starting, is the country changes so fast, faster than any other place in the whole world, I think, that it's very hard to do it justice. And what I was most scared of writing the book was that a friend of mine in South Africa, or somebody really, really knew it, would say, you got it wrong. You didn't get it. I mean, you know, you must find that too. You know, have you got the pulse? But so far, so good. So yeah, that was how I came to it.
Just quickly on that subject, did you feel any tension about returning to that in yourself, in terms of your younger self and your feelings about South Africa? Were they a little bit difficult to deal with, or did you feel quite open and easy about actually embracing South Africa and the crime that's happening there now?
I didn't feel easy about it. I think any white South African who escapes South Africa and who has lived through apartheid has to think very carefully about how they lived, even if they were, as my family was, pretty left-wing and, you know, against the regime. So there was that. I found going there, it's a fabulous place to go for a holiday if any of you are thinking of going. But at the same time, you know, you get into your car and you lock it from the inside so that nobody can hijack you. And you go and stay in your flat and there are 5 locks to get in and 5 locks. So it's you're always conscious of a threat. So there were those tensions. Personally and emotionally, I think I felt immensely happy when I saw how specifically younger people are embracing a new world there, and very unhappy when I saw how the inequities are still there. So it's a very mixed up way of approaching it. It's my bone country. I grew up there, but Australia's my home and has been for many years. So there's that as well.
Yes, yeah, there's always that sort of conflict.
Yeah.
But Louisa, what I found really interesting is I tend to hunker down in a location, you know, build a little bivouac down there, and you move quite fluidly across international boundaries. So I'm wondering, so you go from like London to Johannesburg, you've got a thing in Vietnam. How do you keep those different threads? Because if that was me, I'd have 5 different stories that never met at the end. How do you manage to actually bring all those? Do you actually visualize all the crime elements separately and then figure out how they come together, or is it more organic for you?
What a great question. So when I started writing, and I know you know when I started writing, because I remember there was a time when we first met, Malla, and it was at the Verona Writers' House. And you were already, woohoo, famous, you know, and I was like, new. And I was asking you to help me with the opening chapter of the book. And
I remember that, yes.
Do you remember that?
I do, I
great.
Yes.
It was fantastic. Anyway, and I learned a lot, so thank you, because you really did help me. So I started off not really plotting. And I had, with the Genesis Floor, I knew the story I wanted to tell. Like, I'm a very theme-based writer. And then what I do is I find the characters that are best set to tell the story. They're the right characters for the story. And given my interest in different countries in the world, I knew inevitably I would end up setting them in different places. The first book, The Genesis Floor, has one central character and one point of view. And you follow her. She's an Australian character. You follow her throughout the plot. You only know what she knows. You can pick up some things from other characters that quite clearly she's missed, but pretty much you're with her. And it was perfect for a first book. And then, of course, me being me, I decided to challenge myself a little bit and try and add, you know, some subplots and different points of view and various other things, which sometimes I really wish I didn't. And so I've now, with Prey, I decided to try having, you know, the Olivia Wolfe as a central character, but there are a couple of other characters that do have points of view. And one of them is her nemesis, who is a detective from London, who really from the very beginning, they are literally almost physically fighting each other. And their relationship changes throughout the course of the book. And whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you'll need to wait to the very last page of the book to find out. So, you know, that sort of thing I needed to plan very carefully. And so I've really gone from being somebody that lets it grow quite organically to realizing that the only way I can manage, you know, there's another character, the Vitaly Yashkov character, who is the Russian ex-lover who comes back in. There is actually the psychopath killer. There's a pretty nasty guy who is sent after Olivia to keep her quiet, basically to stop her investigating. And he has a point of view, and he was incredibly difficult to write. I actually found him very difficult to write because he had to sound right, and it's very difficult to write a psychopath convincingly, strangely enough. So I had to plan all this. I literally got to the point where very old-fashioned, I know people use Scrivener and all sorts of things to do it, but I literally got, you know, like the old little cards that you used to have in libraries to index books, you know, the little cards, yeah. I got a whole load of those. I laid them all out on the dining table, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and then started moving them around to see whether. So, long-winded way of saying, I really do have to plot now with flexibility.
Yes.
Otherwise, it would do my head in.
So, Natalie, for you, you had the challenge of almost taking crime from the past in South Africa and weaving it in with the kind of new kind of crimes that are going on as well. So how did that story come to you? Did you have to plot that quite meticulously, or did it feel very organic?
Well, no, I discover I'm a pantser. So it came organically, and then I had to double back several times. But I sort of I had very clearly the first bit, which is Skalk gets called to a murder scene where his apartheid era boss has been executed in a way that was used in apartheid. I had that. That was it. That's what I had. And I thought, oh, well, you know, what would happen? And then I built it around Skalk. And I think it would have been a lot quicker had I had a plot. So I'm trying to plot the next one a bit, but I don't know that I'm super successful either at that.
It might not, it just might be, also you might find, in fact, that Skalk will resist you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Could you please have a word?
He will find out what he finds out just when you do. So there is always that conflict between the author and the characters, and sometimes the characters feel that they want to have their own way. But speaking of the characters in your book, I'm trying not to spoil it, but in both books there are elements of what I would call an unrealized or unsatisfied love affair. So Natalie, do you believe in happy endings? Is it possible for somebody who's an ex-policeman / rugby player in crime-ridden Cape Town to possibly have I mean, I know there's a second book, so you don't have to spoil that for me. Do you believe in happy endings for people in crime books?
I believe in people in crime books. I believe in authentic endings, which is really hard I think in a modern world in crime, to have the complete classical crime tied up. I'd like Skalk to have a happy ending at some stage, but it's like, you know, those TV series where you have the sexual tension and then they get married and the whole thing just dies. So there's that. But personally, I'm totally in favor of happy endings. Rom-coms are my guilty pleasure. So it's just that they don't feel right. You know, the complete happy ending in modern society in a crime novel it's a tough call, I think.
That is, I believe that is actually very true. I think there's nothing that kills the chilling kind of atmosphere of crime like happiness, unless it's I have no. What about you? Because a similar thing is sort of being teased out in Prey, without any spoilers. Do you believe that it's possible for somebody who moves around so much, is so damn curious? Is it possible for Olivia to have a happy ending, or how would you consider a happy ending for Olivia?
So okay, I think that's two things.
That's actually a question. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think so she can be happy in the fact that her happiness is often derived from her ability to achieve what she wanted to do. So by the end of Prey, has she or hasn't she tracked down the brutal person at the head of this really awful criminal syndicate that is responsible, and as the book says on the front cover, 4 murders, 4 countries, 1 terrible secret. So he's behind all that. So, you know, she would be happy to succeed at that. I suppose that's more satisfaction. In terms of relationships, I think you're absolutely right. She has trust issues. She's always on the move. She's extremely independent, and she's certainly not easy. And Vitaly Yoshkov is not the kind of guy you would bring home to meet mum and dad. Seriously not. He's this Russian guy who has been accused of murder, or being a spy. He certainly knows how to handle himself. And when she arrives in South Africa, he's obviously involved in something he shouldn't be. So he is the kind of guy that you have one night of great passionate sex because you will with this guy, but you certainly don't settle down with him and marry him. He's not the right one for that. So Olivia, sadly, he is her Achilles heel. So it's kind of, she goes on an emotional roller coaster ride in relation to what has happened to him. And the big question is, what has he become?
All right. Okay, so we're all broadly agree that happy endings for characters are very difficult in crime. I want to ask some very personal questions of the ladies and some people in their books. So, Natalie, were you just a little bit in love with Skulk when you were writing him?
Oh, yeah. Weren't you in love with Emmanuel Cooper a little bit when you were writing him?
Absolutely. Why would I want to spend some time with somebody unless I totally fancied them?
Do you want to see what Skulk looks like?
Yes, I'd love to.
Well, what happened was I always have a really clear idea of what my characters look like. Mm-hmm. And I'd finished the book and was just waiting for it to be published. And I came across this Flemish actor. His name is Philip Peters. I am hoping you can see this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And when I saw him, I thought, oh, there's Skulk. So, yeah, I mean, he's not unattractive, is he?
No,
yeah,
he's saying he isn't.
Yep. So there you go. Yep, I am a little bit in love with Skulk.
Did you start out like that?
No, I started out...
a love affair that sort of began to grow as you got to know him more?
Well, yeah, I think he was... I don't know. He was. I had to. Yeah, as I got to know him and got to work out that he's kind of wants to do the right thing and he wants things to be fair and I think that's good. That's good. Yes. I'm thinking my way through the next book, but yep, I'm glad to still have him around.
Good. So Louisa, in a parallel world, I know you say that you would never bring Vitaly home to meet your parents, but sometimes that is the best thing about a character, is he's exactly not the person you bring home. So in a parallel world, how hard would you fall for your Russian anti-hero?
So Vitaly has actually been in 2 other books. So he was in Thirst, and he was a very minor supportive character in Antarctica. So he gets around, this guy. He gets around. And the reason why I've kept him in is because I've had a lot of emails from people going, we love Natalie, you must bring him back. So I'm obviously not the only one who thinks he's, but look, I'm making out that he's sort of just, one-sided. There is as you will find out in Prey, a whole complexity to him. And there's also his relationship with Olivia is based on genuine feeling. So he's not, perhaps as one-sided as I'm making out.
Okay. All right. I see that, although I see what both the sort of, not the male leads, but the sort of central males in both your books have is a really amazing tendency to know what's up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In fact, I find it's not so common in the world. I kind of think the idea that there's somebody that could save you from a horrible fate, but also build a shed.
Yeah, very useful. Useful to have around if you're in danger.
Both your guys
maybe we could sell crime fiction as self-help books.
Love it.
Well, it is certainly something. So, Natalie, you've already seen a vision of who your character would be on the screen. Do you feel like, do you see it in your head when you're writing? Is it like a movie for you that you plot it?
Not a movie exactly. It's very visual. I have to be able to see. If I can't see it, and that's why I kind of have to. I can imagine places, but I think if you actually go to a place, there's a scene in present tense. I better do this. Present tense,
yes,
set in Peloux in which is a little kind of village in South Africa, and I had written this bit, and then I went there, and it was different. So while I have to see it, I'm not thinking, gee, this would make a film. This is a movie. It's just that I have to be there.
Right. And as for Olivia, do you have a sneaking feeling about who might be great for her if it all came to the screen, Louisa?
Well, it was interesting. I was asked that question last night, so I've got somebody. I think that person would be Daisy Ridley, who plays the role in the last 3 Star Wars. Because Olivia Wolfe is sort of small but feisty, English. So I see Daisy Ridley. I think would be about the right age, and I think she'd do a pretty good job of it. So yeah, that's who I see. I would also just say, because Natalie was talking about visiting your locations and the difference it actually makes. And we can't all do it. Internet can tell us all sorts of amazing things. We can get, Google Maps, and we can walk down streets that we're not actually walking down, and you can write stories as if you're actually running down alleyways and things. But I think when it comes to the sensory perception, you're building you want your readers to believe they're actually there. They are inside Olivia's head, and they're going through what she's going through. You want to have those sort of sense of smell and touch and taste and what she's everything, hearing. And I think for me to have actually been to certain places within South Africa and have sat there and thought, wow, I could just imagine Olivia having to plunge into this, watering hole in the middle of the night when it's pitch black and goodness knows what's in it, but she's got no choice. And I think you get the smell of it and everything, and I think it if you can do it, it makes I think it's helpful.
Yeah, on the ground, or what the Greeks call exchanging breath with an audience or an environment. So I think we're actually kind of coming to an end here, but I have been asked to ask you guys, so Natalie, what book would you recommend for people who are quarantined right now? after your book, of course,
And Louise's. Sorry, I should have this up, but I've been reading such a lot that I've gone back to reading The Spy Who Came In From the Cold.
Oh, lovely.
I'm a huge Le Carré fan, and I just thought I kind of want to read an old classic, and my God, the writing is just
it's amazing,
stupendous. So yeah, that or Tinker Tailor is another amazing book. So Le Carré, I think.
Oh, terrific. And Louisa?
Well, I've just finished. I'm probably behind everybody else, but I've just finished this one.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you can see that. Can you? Yeah. So I've just finished that. So I think this is the third in the series, I believe. But again, it's written so you don't actually have to have read the first two. You know, you can still enjoy it. So yeah, I would recommend that one.
Terrific. So I think that we're actually out of time now, ladies, but I need to ask you just quickly, what kind of word would describe the kind of crimes that are happening in your books? Do you have a nice chewy word for me that you could use, say, my book is? We can end on something like that.
Ooh. You go first, Louisa.
Here's more one. We're authors. How can we possibly just use one word?
All right, I'll give you a sentence.
All right.
You're allowed to use
a whole sentence.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say Prey is a terrifying roller coaster ride.
There you go.
There you go. I don't know. That'll probably put people off now.
And I'm going to say present tense is about a man trying to find himself and his discovery will affect his country.
Oh,
small. It's a bit of a clumsy sentence, but that's the best I can do.
So I would say high stakes.
Thank you.
High stakes.
Yep, high stakes.
And Malla, how would you describe this, my darling?
It's about friendship and it's about love.
Oh,
so I took a real detour from crime, I can tell you. I did a flip from crime. So it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you guys. And I personally think that South Africa is just such a dynamic, beautiful, rich environment to write almost any kind of book, and including crime. So thank you both for actually digging in and giving us a look at South Africa and some of the problems that are there, and actually just sort of presenting it to us and giving that location to us as readers. So thank you very much for both your wonderful books. They're dynamically different, but they really do sing to the country. So I believe I'm meant to end up here by saying this has all been that all our books are available at Glebe Books. And that this whole entire event has been brought to you by Sisters in Crime, and that you can find out more by looking at www.sistersincrime.org.au. So we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry we couldn't meet in person and have a drink and natter on about nothing for ages and ages. That would have been delightful. So thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Malla. Thank you, Sisters in Crime.
Cheers, Sisters in Crime.